Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. After several years of diplomatic tensions, there could be an opening for Turkey and Egypt. The two countries, who share cultural ties dating back centuries, saw relations spiral downwards in 2013 after the overthrow of Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. But now, small steps are being taken by both sides to reverse nearly a decade of deadlock. Already there were signs that both countries' regional interests were starting to overlap. After backing warlord Khalifa Haftar against Libya's UN-backed government, Egypt met with officials from the GNA late last year. Turkey and Egypt also supported the formation of Libya's new interim government. When it comes to disputes in the energy-rich Eastern Mediterranean, Cairo has shown that it is willing to consider Ankara's concerns. The end of the Qatar blockade in January also removed a major diplomatic hurdle. But many sticking points still remain, and repairing a decade of mistrust could take more than small diplomatic overtures. And to break down what's at stake, joining me from Istanbul is Huseyin Avni Botsali. He is Turkey's former ambassador to Egypt. And from Doha, Ali Bakir. He is an assistant professor at the Ibn Khaldun Center at Qatar University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Ali, what is behind this new diplomatic push and where is this headed?
I think that both sides now are testing each other's. They will probably respond to the dynamics and regional shifts as a result of a new game in the region after Biden's victory in the United States. Both Ankara and Cairo have concrete interests in some files in the Eastern Mediterranean and Libya, and probably now they see it's a chance to test how much they could work together on these files. Of course, it will not be easy. It will be a long process, and I don't think they will negotiate or discuss problematic matters at the beginning. Otherwise, these communications will end as fast as they started.
So, Huseyin Avni, as a former ambassador, is it promising you that the relations could now thaw and the two sides take steps to normalize their relations? Do you think it will be an easy road?
It will not be an easy fix, but it is a strategic change of paradigm that we are faced with. The global economic recession, as well as the scenarios being prepared for post-pandemic new world order, dictates new strategic priorities to all nations, not only Turkey and Egypt, not only in the Eastern Mediterranean, but globally. Every nation and country, every state, every government has to see it. So Turkey and Egypt combined economic scale, when it's considered as two strategic economic partners, it is easily in the first 15 of world's top economies. So these two countries are not competitors in none of the major economic sectors, but they are complementary. Therefore, under the current circumstances, with near immediate and mid-term future prospects, it is going to be in the strategic interests of both Egypt and Turkey to review and revise their perceptions and their strategic planning for a sustainable economic stability and development.
So, Ali, what are the challenges lie ahead? Which sticking issues are a priority for both Turkey and Egypt?
Let me first say that I'm sure of the strategic motives of Turkey in this issue, but I'm not sure about Cairo's intentions. There might be some tactical motives. We have to wait and see whether this is true or not. Cairo could be using Turkey to gain leverage against its partners in the Gulf and the Eastern Mediterranean, especially UAE and Greece, after it saw that its weight is a little bit retreating after the UAE-Israeli accord, and also after the talks between Europeans and Turkey and Greece and Turkey. So I think that we should keep our expectation modest, and we should not exaggerate the messages coming from both. We should wait the results of the initial contacts between the two capitals. I think that if they manage to focus on the common interest between them and ignore the problematic issue, they might proceed to another stage or level. But if they started directly with the problematic issues, they might not reach anywhere. So this is my take on it.
So having mentioned those interests, Huseyin Avni, what are the shared interests of Turkey and Egypt? Could we talk about Libya, for example?
Well, before coming to Libya, first, Turkey and Egypt has almost 100% completed the legal and institutional infrastructure of strategic economic partnership prior to the recent tensions that undermined the bilateral interests. So those legal and institutional framework remains intact. And that is the conducive main element, is the springboard, if I may say so, to jumpstart the relations and gradually rebuild, rehabilitate, and repair if there are any damages. I do not believe that there are unrepairable damages inflicted. And if you consider Egypt and Turkey has risen from $500 million of bilateral trade in the beginning of the century to over $5.2 billion. And despite the political tensions and bitternesses, both countries, both leaderships have very cautiously refrained from undermining the people-to-people contacts and the commercial and industrial relations.
Yes.
Egypt maintained Turkish investments, and the bilateral trade is booming again to the levels of 2011, 2012. That is 5.2 billion US dollars.
Yeah, so Ali, you just previously mentioned, but I would like to ask, how could a possible reconciliation between Cairo and Ankara impact the region, especially the United Arab Emirates, because we know that the United Arab Emirates did not consult Egypt before normalizing relations with Israel. And now we see that Turkey and Israel are also getting closer. What's your take on that?
Yeah, exactly. The Egyptian side is probably also sending messages to his partners when he's communicating with Turkey, saying that if you want to normalize with Turkey without us, if you want to make deals in the Gulf and with Israel without us, we will be able also to do the same. And that's why there is a side that reflecting this message in the Turkey-Egypt communications. Another issue I will touch briefly is the challenges that face such communication. Of course, some regional countries who used to use Egypt as a shield in their battles with Turkey in the last few years, they would not be satisfied with any rapprochement between Egypt and Turkey, mainly UAE and Greece. That's why if you are monitoring the news outlets and platforms on both countries, you will see that they are criticizing Egypt, and they are also spreading fake news about Turkey giving or sending opposition figures to Cairo and closing the channels permanently and stuff like this. So they will try to spoil these communications and try to influence these communications. But I think that, as I said before, we have to wait a little bit before rushing into judgments on what's going to happen next.
Yes, but Huseyin Avni, looking from the bright side, let's say, how could a possible agreement in Eastern Mediterranean change the formation of the East Med Forum, as well as Cairo's relations with Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration? Do you think Egypt has a room to maneuver in its relations with the Greek sides?
First of all, let me also highlight my personal opinion that we are reaching to a moment where it is about high time to restrain public diplomacy, because the issues between the two countries are rather complex by nature. So now both countries' governments and leaderships may wish to opt for silent diplomacy and strategic patience instead of high statements and public diplomacy efforts. Secondly, coming to the Mediterranean Forum and Egypt's role, Egypt is definitely the admiral ship for the Arab world. regardless of its economic constraints, politically and historically, Egypt has this status and it will continue exercising influence. So Egypt's constructive role would be also reflecting positively on other aspects of the issues, outstanding issues in the Eastern Mediterranean. When it comes to Turkish Greek and Greek Cypriot tensions and issues, in the past, during my tenure of office, the Egyptian leadership and government has taken initiatives and have listened Turkey's technical and professional views and doctrines with regard to the limitation of economic zones, etc. So I believe that Egypt will gradually move towards dialogue and will exercise its influence as a leader of the Arab League, a host country of the Arab League, as well as a major coastal state in the Eastern Mediterranean.
All right. Ali, how could a more moderate Gulf and Arab approach towards Turkey could impact Iran's clout in the Gulf as well as in the Middle East? And are we likely to witness significant shifts in power relations in the region moving forward?
I think that it will not be in Iran's interest to see a rapprochement between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, for example, on one side, or Turkey and Egypt, because this will shift the balance that has been there after the 2017 blockade against Doha, and will isolate Iran regionally. That's why now we are witnessing a very complex dynamics after Biden's victory and Al-Ula agreement in the Gulf. And I don't see concrete grounds for any of the scenarios right now, because everyone is waiting the next step of the other, and they are also waiting the measures of the great powers in the region. So I think that there are some tactical moves, and when it comes to reconciliation or more rapprochement between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, Turkey and UAE, I think that the more the U.S. administration is making pressure on Saudi Arabia, the more this will push it towards Turkey and expedite the process of rapprochement. On the other hand, if Riyadh feels that it is not obliged to go towards Turkey, then in the absence of any U.S. pressure, we will not see any progress. Also, UAE has an interest to keep Saudi Arabia close to it, and that's why there are efforts to convince the Saudis that relation with Israel is better than relations with Turkey for Saudi Arabia. But this is, of course, Riyadh cannot afford such a relation, especially if it will go public.
All right, it seems that we'll have to wait and see before any progress is made in the region. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been called America's longest war. Nearly 20 years ago, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan to remove the Taliban from power following the September 11th attacks. During those 2 decades of fighting, peace talks have sporadically come and gone with no major breakthroughs. And now, with the latest Doha peace talks stalled, the international community is hoping new approaches might bring some results. Russia has called for a power-sharing deal and ceasefire as it hosted the latest peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. Attacks against Afghan officials and security forces have seen a steady rise this year, including a bombing in Kabul that killed 4 as the latest peace conference opened. The talks in Moscow also came a day after U.S. President Joe Biden warned that it could be difficult for the U.S. to meet a May 1st deadline to pull out U.S. troops. Meanwhile, Turkey is also set to host an Afghan peace conference in Istanbul next month that will run alongside the Qatar-hosted talks. So how effective will this latest call for peace be, and how will the Biden administration navigate pressure for the U.S. to remain in Afghanistan past its May deadline? And joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Umar Samat, who is a former Afghan ambassador, and from Islamabad, Imtiaz Gul. He is a security analyst and executive director for the Islamabad-based Center for Research and Security Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Imtiaz, As May the 1st deadline for military withdrawal from Afghanistan approaches, how will the U.S. proposal to accelerate peace process in Afghanistan play out for you?
Well, right now it's a very porous situation. Nobody is clear really whether the Biden administration wants to stick to the May 1st withdrawal deadline. What we understand is perhaps he may agree to extend the date by November by like 5-6 months. It's still very, very unclear, particularly what has come out of the Moscow conference, the call on the Taliban, for instance, to stop projecting themselves as the Islamic Emirate. And secondly, I think what the Russian side has underlined is the adherence to the agreements and the progress that has so far been made under the Doha process. So that has created a little bit of uncertainty as to whether the next round of talks will take in Istanbul at all, or will they go back to Doha and continue from where they broke off?
So, Omar, what's the biggest hurdle before an agreement between the Taliban and the Afghan government?
Well, there are many hurdles. I think that Imtiaz pointed out a few of those. At this point, it's a process, and the process has different steps. As of a few weeks ago, we all know the Americans launched a new initiative, and this new initiative calls for conferences, gatherings that would have to hammer out a political roadmap with some very clear-cut achievements along the way in a very short period of time. So Moscow was one step, in my opinion, where some of the stakeholders met, and then we are expecting a few others leading to Turkey, where something more important needs to happen. And everybody is hoping that by then we would have ironed out some of the hurdles and some of the wrinkles and come up with an agreement, an arrangement for a transition period in Afghanistan that may include a power sharing agreement between the warring sides.
So, Imtiaz, can we say that Afghan government and the Taliban are both on board now? Has Taliban settled with the idea of establishment of a interim government to which it had opposed in the past?
Well, I think the Taliban are apparently on board for such a participatory, whatever you may call it, or interim government. The problem, I think, is with Kabul, with President Ashraf Ghani, who has been sort of averse to any sort of interim arrangement. At one stage, he had said, an interim government over my dead body. And the sense we got from our discussions with a number of people in Kabul very recently, yesterday and the day before, is that President Ghani may have agreed now to an interim government, but that he himself would oversee that interim government to hold fresh elections. So that is, I think, the major sticking point. The Taliban have ruled out altogether any possibility of President Ashraf Ghani lording over or overseeing such an arrangement.
All right. So, Omar, by hosting the latest round of talks, Moscow has urged the U.S. to withdraw in May as scheduled. Why do you think Russia is helping the U.S. to get out of Afghanistan? What's at stake for Moscow?
Well, I think that over time, many countries around Afghanistan, with one or two exceptions maybe, have realized that the continuation of war in Afghanistan is to no one's benefit. Obviously, it's not to the benefit of the Afghan people. So there has to be some kind of a settlement, a political way out of war. And that is what the Americans have realized after what Mr. Trump did, and now Mr. Biden has been reviewing this case and coming to the same conclusions. Now, obviously, we don't know if the American withdrawal will happen in May or whether it will be extended by a few months. But my view from Washington is that Americans will definitely leave at some point this year. It's a question of finding that interim period within which we can put some of the pieces in order for a political roadmap that can work for all sides. And so the international community's role is very important. And not only Russia, but I think China and Pakistan are also on board with this. And more importantly, I think the Afghan people want to see an end to bloodshed and war, and they don't want any one side
to
to
interfere.
become a hurdle and interfere or object and be a sort of an opposition to
Yes.
the effort to find peace in Afghanistan.
So Imtiaz, Turkey has in the past spearheaded tripartite summits with Afghanistan and Pakistan, and Turkey is no stranger to Afghanistan. We all know that. Why do you think it was asked by the US to engage in this peace talks now? And will moving this process to Turkey achieve anything?
Well, I think there's a lot of empathy as well as goodwill for Turkey in Afghanistan, the sense that we got, and I also spoke with a number of European diplomats in Kabul, and they all said that even without NATO, Turkey had already made a commitment to stay on as part of the ISAF mission in Afghanistan. So that basically showed Turkey's commitment to a Muslim country, to a brotherly country, and it's basically resolved to help Afghans get out of the conflict. So I think this is a realization that has sunk in also with the United States to use Turkey's influence and goodwill within Afghanistan to have it lead a process that may culminate in some sort of settling of the conflict.
So, Omar, would you agree? Do you believe that Moscow and Istanbul talks would be different than the previous ones?
I think that the Turkey talks will be extremely important once we reach that point. So there's a bit of time in between that is very important. I think that Turkey is seen as an honest broker, as a country that obviously has historic ties, and people in Afghanistan trust it. So the trust factor is very important. Remember that now the United Nations is also asked to play a role, and so it's going to be very important for the UN to be an honest broker as well, and to handle Afghanistan even-handedly. So all of this combined gives me a bit of hope that we are on the right track, knowing that there are many obstacles and hurdles along the way.
All right. So, Imtiaz, what could you tell us about Pakistan's position? Is it genuinely this time supporting this process?
Well, why shouldn't be Pakistan genuinely supporting this entire process of peace in Afghanistan? Pakistan itself has suffered tremendously in multiple ways because of the continued conflict, and it also realizes that until Afghanistan stabilizes, until peace returns to Afghanistan, it will be very difficult to reap the dividends of economic development, particularly those that are flowing from the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So Pakistan really needs a peaceful neighborhood in order to realize the goal of economic development and get out of the economic stagnation that it has seen for over a decade because of the continued war in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. So, Omar, if a peace deal is reached, what would Afghanistan's future look like? I mean, how will it be ruled? Will Afghan people's rights be protected, or Afghan women continue to be banished from the public life? What's your take on that?
Well, I hope that is not the case. I hope we've learned the lessons from the past 20, 25 years, including the Taliban. I hope they have learned the lessons and they realize that Afghan society has changed, that we need to come to a middle ground. We need compromise, we need flexibility, we need understanding, and we need an Afghan-owned future. That is very important, in my opinion. So for that to happen, we need to sit down and talk in earnest, talk about real difficult, tough issues that have to do with everything from a political order to human rights to freedoms that Afghans have enjoyed and are entitled to.
Yes.
And I think that the Taliban would need to realize that it's, at the end of the day, it's the Afghan people who have to decide what is best for them.
Yes, so Imtiaz, 4 decades of war and distrust, how will Afghan people overcome that? And are you hopeful that an agreement acceptable for all sides will be reached one day?
Well, of course, there will be an agreement one day, but how soon? That, I think, is a billion-dollar question, particularly given the very reticent, inflexible position that Taliban have taken vis-a-vis President Ashraf Ghani, and the insistence on the retention of the title Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. It will also depend on how statesmanly President Ashraf Ghani conducts himself when it comes to real cutting a deal, and whether he drops his insistence on overseeing the interim setup.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Subarkash. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.